And officially welcome y'all to Organizing 101, our first session. Again, my name is Jen Brown. I'm the Education Director here at Renew. And before we get started, I want to toss it over to two of my amazing team members. We'll do Nina and then Frida to introduce themselves. And then that way, if they're going to stick around, they're welcome to. And if they have other very important things to do, which you'll hear about, they are happy to bounce. So Nina, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nina. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am currently based in Tucson, Arizona, but my roots and my organizing roots are in the South, specifically around working to end cash bail in Durham, North Carolina with a group called Southerners on New Ground. Here at Renew, I went through the campaign manager training program in 2021. It's their 8-week series, which we're offering this fall. And I worked as a coach and now am the community manager here at Renew. So this is an invitation to y'all to meet with me to discuss any questions or ideas or challenges that come up during the session. I have office hours weekly, which I will drop in the chat. And yeah, even if you just want to set up a call to get to know each other, to kind of dream and scheme, I'm happy to do that. I support both our coaching program and alumni engagement at Renew, which now includes y'all. So, or will, if you make it through the next hour and a half. And I'll pass it to Frida.
Awesome. Thank you both. My name is Frida, she, her pronouns. I am the Movement Politics Director here at Renew, which houses both our education program as well as candidate recruitment for the states that we are currently in. We are currently in 12 states, I believe, with some talks about expanding in the future, and really just want to hop on to welcome all of you into our community. We're really thinking about different ways that we can continue to do our organizing work in a sustainable way. I think all of us have had experiences coming into this kind of work, loving it, and also finding very little time for ourselves and becoming really invested in the movement and finding it difficult to really find that boundary between work and our personal life. I think really the thing that I always like to leave my team with is thinking about how organizing really is just more than the actual organizing work. It's the healing work that we do individually. It's the community care work. Ultimately, that is what organizing is about. It's about those relationships. So thank you everyone for being here. We're really excited to invite you into the community, and Jen has prepared some wonderful stuff for you. Nina is also phenomenal in their coaching and in the space that they hold for others. So please do make use of the resources that we have here and the folks that we have here, and welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, friends. I want to say definitely that throughout this hour and a half, or what's left of the hour and a half, we're going to deep dive into where organizing came from. I'm going to show you the agenda shortly. If you get through even some of the hour and a half, if you're like, hey, I got to bounce, there's no worries here, because like Frida said, this is part of our lives. It is too much to be like, oh, this is my organizing side and this is my real life, because that doesn't work, because then you start treating organizing like work as opposed to a part of your community. So I just want to echo the fact that both of my colleagues have said, take advantage of resources. You'll be sent the entire recording regardless after class. And you'll also be CC'd on an email with both Frida and Nina. So if you do want to take advantage of what's coming up, office hours, also the community care circle that is coming up that we're super excited about, all good things, you're more than welcome to do so. Coaching is something that we really believe in here. We all get coached. We all coach one another. I can safely say that we are all always trying to learn here on our team. And it's really beautiful to be able to grow with folks like this. So let's dive into what we're diving into today. We kind of did a beautiful introduction. I'm so happy my colleagues were here to welcome you to our space. We are going to go through some of those answers to what is organizing to you. Just look at them real quick, see if people have some reciprocity, people have some connections. And then we're going to dive into group agreements and some grounding. Then the meat of today, really digging into what is organizing, how we got to this state, where the idea of organizing came from, power, and what we have to do next. I'm going to be very transparent. This one is a lot of information. The following sessions are more doing than talking. I'm going to be very honest with you. Power mapping, super important. Story of self, organizing conversation, canvassing, script writing, all good things. And this fundamental stuff is something I never knew when I started organizing. I'm a housing organizer here in Winston-Salem. I've done a lot of housing work in New York when I lived there, and I didn't know this stuff. I just heard people talking about certain things or throwing around certain names. And for me, understanding where things came from, understanding like why we are in this really, I was going to say terrible, I'm going to say hopeful moment right now on the left and where we're going. So let's get started. What's organizing to you? We've got building trust and rapport with your community, giving voice to the voiceless for an equitable society, bringing people together and resources to gain power and make positive and lasting change. Leadership that gets people to take the resources they have, turn them into the power they need to make the change they want. Amazing. And also organizing to me is bringing the community together to bring action to benefit all. Yeah, if you hear some things that are resonating with you, like feel free, really like shout that out in the chat, use the chat. I just want to go over group agreements really briefly. We're a small group, like I said, so I don't think we're going to have any issues. I just like to have these agreements before every program. So if you agree to our agreements, give a thumbs up in the chat. Give a thumbs up on your reactions. I'm going to read through them very briefly. So first, stay on mute unless you're actively speaking. This isn't stay on mute because I'm going to talk at you the entire time. This is, we've all been in that Zoom room where you hear the background noise of other folks, and it's really distracting, especially someone who's neurodivergent like me, that I can't concentrate if I'm hearing 20 different things go on. Cameras on in groups. Probably won't use breakout rooms today because we are a small group. I will say though that when you're in a small group on Zoom, just a little shout out like, hey, I'm here is awesome. Here, I know you're here. And if you're here and also doing other stuff, the other night, one of our participants was making macaron while she was part of class. And I'm like, that is really cool. Like, I love that we're taking these moments together. Use the chat. Y'all are already doing that. If you have a question, type question in all caps. That way I can see it and I'll be able to be like, hey, I got you. I will pull you out and have a conversation with you. Richard, I see you. I'm going to get to you in 1 second, okay? If you have something that you want to say, please type stack in the chat, STACK, and then we will pull you off mute, be able to have a conversation, step up, step back. If you're a person that talks a lot, hold and let some other people speak up. If you're a person that doesn't speak up, take a chance. Why not? Impact is heavier than intent. You might have the greatest intentions in the world and it could still land with a little bit of negative impact. So let's just be mindful of everyone, where they're coming from, where we're going. And then finally, pronouns. If you'd like to change your name to show your pronouns, go to your Zoom little square, go to the 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner, click rename, and then you can put your pronouns in your Zoom name. While folks are giving thumbs up if they agree, Richard, I got you. What's up?
Okay. Sorry for the correction, not to be presumptuous, but she was making macaroons, not macarons.
Got it. Thanks so much, Richard. Appreciate it. Thank you for the correction. It's all good. Just want to check in. Is everyone feeling good about where we are? Good. I see a lot of thumbs up. Fantastic. We are going to get rolling. Grounding. What are you all fighting for? Now, type it in the chat. Think about what you're fighting for. Don't hit send yet. I want to tell you a little bit of my organizing origin stories. I just want to give a trigger warning, heads up. I'm going to be talking about abuse. If you have an issue with it, definitely go off mute, walk away. I'll like flag you down like this. If you would like to come back, I just like to give that moment for people. If you need to walk away, you're more than welcome to. There's one other trigger warning that we'll give in the end of the program. It's content warning more than anything else, but I will bring it up when we get there. So while you're thinking about what you're fighting for, I want to tell you how I became a housing organizer. So it goes all the way back to when I was in 7th grade. And it was one night my dad came home from a work party and he came home drunk. And he actually started choking my mom, and me being a 7th grader jumped on his back, tried to defend my mom, and he threw me off his back. This 6'3", 200 some pound dude throws me off his back and kicks me in the ribs, broke my ribs, and my mom called the police. This was not new. Grew up in a household of trauma and abuse. That calling the police was. He was arrested that night, and I remember having this conversation with my mom as a 7th grader, begging her for us to leave. I just wanted to go somewhere else, anywhere but here. I wanted to go to an apartment. I didn't want to live in this house anymore. I kept asking and asking. I remember the next night that I actually had a math test with Mr. Jones's 7th grade math, and I was like in the advanced math. And I was so excited to take this test. And I knew I wouldn't be able to go to school because this is too much. Like, my ribs were broken, dad was arrested, all of this. And my mom never left, and she didn't want to leave. Well, I don't know if she didn't want to leave. Let me take that back. She never expressed to us that leaving was an option and getting an apartment was an option or going anywhere else. And I remember how mad I was that we just had to stay there. Well, the state pressed charges on my dad because it was the time, and I'm dating myself a little bit, of like O.J. Simpson and all of that. So the state of Wisconsin actually pressed charges on my dad. And we spent the entire summer staying in a hotel in Racine, Wisconsin, which is about 30 minutes away from where I was living at the time, avoiding a subpoena so my dad wouldn't go to jail, avoiding it so we could protect him. I can't tell you how that ruins the life of a 7th into 8th grader, spending a summer at the Roadway Inn in Racine, Wisconsin, away from your friends, can't go home, can't get your stuff because you can't get that subpoena. So furious at my mom for not just leaving. Fast forward, my mom didn't have a high school diploma. She actually dropped out of high school to get married to my dad and had me 4 years later. My mom didn't have a job. My mom didn't have savings. My mom didn't make 40 times your monthly rent to get us into a place or whatever it might have been at that point in the 90s. She couldn't leave. And realizing that as an adult, that she couldn't leave, that she felt trapped, that she didn't have any financial means to get a safe and dignified place to live with her children, is infuriating beyond anything. And now, after years of being housing insecure, randomly myself, sleeping on couches, almost filing for bankruptcy, I'm actually looking for a house right now, which is the strangest 180 of my childhood. And I still believe that housing is a human right, not affordable housing. Housing, safe, dignified housing is a human right for every single person. And I will fight until there's blood under my nails, until my dying day, house or not, until housing is closer to being a human right. And that's what I'm fighting for. I would love to hear what y'all are fighting for. Please hit enter, send those things in the chat, spend some time. What are you fighting for? What are you fighting to change in this world? Like, what's gotten you so mad that you just can't live with anymore, that you're like, I got to do something. I can't stick my head in the sand. Type it in the chat. Let it go. I would say, Nancy, I just started talking about this in the last few years. And I will say that I've gone through a lot of therapy to talk about it, real talk. And when you do share what this is called is like your story of self, it's important. And if you take story of self with us, to share from a scar, not from a wound. A scar, not a wound. If the wound is open, it's going to hurt when you share. If it's a scar, it's healed over and it's there. So we got a couple. We got health equity, fighting for people to rest without fear. Yes. Fighting for healthcare as a human right. Absolutely. Universal basic income. Richard, is your hand up from before, or is it a new hand up? You're muted if you're talking. You're muted. I can't hear you. You're muted. Got my town in Vermont just voted in a new mayor, replacing the 3-term prior mayor. This used to be the 2nd largest in Vermont. Now is the 5th. Housing one, other things for those in need, personally experienced. Yeah, go ahead.
Bankruptcy.
Yeah.
I'm living off of a Social Security disemployment in income now. So I'm in the, not poverty, but certainly lower income class, even being here in Vermont, which itself is a lot lower than where I was in New York City at the top of my C-level executive career. I'm making, an eighth or a sixth of what I was making in New York City now, and have no assets to show for it.
And it's interesting how quickly, I don't want to say how quickly that happens, but it does very much happen very quickly, where we are closer every day to being houseless than we are to being a billionaire. And it's one of those things that I wish more people understood how close that is. Thank y'all for sharing the stuff that we're fighting for. I saw the last one come in: labor rights, livable wages, dignity at work. Absolutely. If you haven't connected with EWOC, you definitely should. If you're already connected with EWOC, then you're all good. Doing good stuff over there. Fighting for justice for those who are threatened and not safe simply because of who they are. Yes, race, gender, identity, all of that stuff. Absolutely. So something I want to do together right now is I'm going to share just my desktop. So you're going to see, luckily I have a dual monitor, so you're going to see no mess in my desktop, but we're going to fill this out together. So can everyone see my screen right now? You see the slides on the left? Fantastic. Something that comes up around organizing that I like to squash as soon as possible. Organizing isn't helping. Right? Organizing is working with others. It's not charity. It's not the things that sometimes we those are separate things. Those are not bad things. Don't get me wrong. Services are not bad things. And they're different than organizing. So we're going to go through this chart together. I want to encourage people, come off mute. This activity, I can't think of wrong answers. I want to say there's no wrong answers. So I want to say there's no wrong answers. I think there's no wrong answers, but let's do this together. So an example of a service. So when we're thinking an example, it's a specific example of something you've come in contact with that is a service for individuals.
Mentoring.
Great.
Parents, youth who are growing up without, let's say, a father figure, such as I'm doing with a mentee here in Rutland.
Great. Mentoring kids, food banks, providing food. Absolutely. Oh, were you saying that, Makaya? I heard someone come off mute. I'm sorry if I talked over you. Food banks, fantastic. Shelters, awesome. Great. Who's doing? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Education.
Who's doing these things? Who's doing the mentoring of the kids? Who's doing food banks? Who's running shelters? Who's doing education? States, nonprofit. What else?
Volunteers.
What else? Professionals, yeah.
Churches.
Fantastic. You're going to see how great sometimes I spell and how often I use this lovely little underneath. Forgot an I. Professionals, churches, great. Who are they doing this to? Who is receiving the service of mentoring? Who is receiving the services of a food bank?
Hopefully those in need of those services.
People in need, what else? Or who else? I think that sums it up pretty well, Richard. People in need, right?
You just want to make sure that they're going to those in need and not those who are simply taking because it's available.
There are very few people that actually take for what's available, if it's just available. And if we help a few people that are taking along the way while we're helping people that need, I don't care. Very few people are sociopathic and malicious in that sense. So I'm going to squash that immediately. What's a source of of these services power? How are they able to mentor kids? How are they able to operate a food bank?
Well, for my situation, it's politicians.
Politicians.
Source of power.
What else? Money and time. Yes. Politicians, money. Where does the money and time come from?
People.
People. So foundations, people donating, right? People giving. I'll put people giving money and time. Money and time. Fantastic. Sliding a little off the slide. It's fine. Y'all have the deck. So this is why we do this. How about advocacy? Let's go down this one. What's an example of some advocacy? Lobbying. Yes. Lobbying is one of those that like sums up the advocacy pretty well, I think.
Mhm.
All right. If folks have others, holla, let me know. Who is doing the lobbying?
Individual and groups.
Yep. Individuals, groups,
Like experts.
experts. Yeah. Who are they lobbying? Who are they doing the lobbying to?
People in power.
People in power, right?
Mhm.
And what is the source of the lobbyist's power? We've got it a little bit. We're already coming out with it with experts, right? Their source of power is their expertise.
Mhm.
What other sources of power do these
Passion.
Go ahead.
Passion.
Passion,
Mhm.
expertise,
Knowledge.
knowledge. Yeah, this is good. Knowledge. How about mobilizing? What's an example of mobilizing?
Canvassing.
Hmm?
Canvassing.
Canvassing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Canvassing is a great example. Actions, canvassing, phone banking, protesting,
Phone
all of that.
Yeah. Protesting. Yeah.
Who's doing it? Who's doing the canvassing?
Hmm.
Volunteers. Volunteers are paid staff. Who are they doing this to? Who are they canvassing?
The community.
Community, constituents,
Their neighbors.
neighbors, exactly. Constituents, community, neighbors. What's the source of their power? Where does their power come from?
Like the amount of people that they have.
The amount of people, absolutely. More people, more canvassing is done, more numbers. Let's go into organizing now. What's an example of organizing? Community organizing for what? Oh, labor, there we go. Now we're going. So community organizing, unions, labor, absolutely. Who is doing the organizing? So we've got employees in the case of labor, members.
So that's the people who will be benefiting from.
Yes, right? The people who are directly impacted, the people who will
Exactly.
benefit. Yeah. Who are they doing this to?
For themselves.
Themselves, right? They're organizing themselves. What is the source of their power? What makes for powerful organizing?
The collective.
The collective, right? The relationships. Yes, Zoe. Yes, the relationships, the connections. So real talk, I took this from a housing organizing session that we had a couple years back because we were, as a group, looking at the things that we offered. We offered a housing hotline for people going through evictions. We were doing court support. We were trying to get our lawmakers to care, period. And we were doing some tenant organizing. And we realized that we were literally putting out these fires all over the place, but we were going like this instead of going like this and putting all of our power in one direction. And so after looking at this and doing this as our group, we actually got rid of some of the services that we were offering. The eviction hotline's one of them. Now it's a tenant organizing hotline. We got rid of some of the advocacy we were doing, and now we're specifically fighting for a right to counsel, which is if you get evicted, you automatically get a lawyer to go to court, because right now it's something like 80% of landlords will have a lawyer. 80 to 90% of landlords will have a lawyer, and up to 10% of tenants actually have a lawyer when they go to eviction court, which is ugh. Mobilizing is only good when you have a strategy. You can canvas, and if you don't know why you're canvassing, it's like you have wasted time, you have wasted energy. And when you think about organizing, there's so much of people who will benefit, people who are directly effective, collective relationships themselves. It's truly something that all of us are digging into. So I want to go ahead and continue on this journey around organizing and continue our slide deck. Let me just pop up share screen. We're going to take some nice pauses to make sure everything is making sense too. So if you're like, please drop a question in the chat by all means. Also know that I'm going to stop and pause at some point. When you're looking at this and thinking about the organizations that maybe you've done work with, that you've connected with, that you're looking at to organize with, really paying attention to what their end goal is. There is not a thing wrong with people that are doing services. Not a thing. Zero. Amazing. We need services. And what is the end goal of services? Hopefully not to need it anymore, but how are they looking to make that change? And so like starting to ask these questions, this is where Frida and I really get into it. Frida's actually my manager, and we talk a lot about like where we're putting our time in the world. And again, really, really important to have some of these services. And the service just keeps servicing. It's not fighting for a change. The service will continue servicing. The service, when it's funded, it will keep on servicing. So I want to say, like, really, when you're thinking about change, you're digging into this idea of people and resources coming together in organizing to make some change. We can't just be the leftists that are constantly going, oh my gosh, this would be such a great world, and we can only allow people in that understand all these organizing principles. We can't do that, because we need to leave room for people that are still waking up to what's going on in the world. And we need to all think about how we are all in this fight together in order to really make change, because it's not me or you or anyone. It is all of us. We need some kind of change because the world is not where it needs to be right now. I want to start, well, at first I want to pause. Before I dive into like some organizing, like where organizing came from and the ideas around organizing, not really where it came from, but some theories around it with a little funny anecdote of why we even have organizing theories. How is this landing with people? How are you feeling? excited and inspired. Even if you told me bored and exhausted, I would be okay still. Good. This all makes so much sense. Providing clarity. Cool. This is like, I really wanted this specifically to take this base of organizing so we understand a bit more. So let's go on to organizing theories now, right? So I'm going to get a little heady for a minute. Promise you it comes to a point. And if you want to dig in more, and it's funny because Richard was actually in the session on Monday and he was ready, set, go to dig into more. So I absolutely adore the fact that he was like, I think I've seen this already. I'm going peace. So organizing theories. First one we've got political opportunity theory. All of these can be broken down into really specific points. There's so much more to read on all three that I'm going to introduce. So again, I'll send you more resources. I'm just going to make them really simple for us to understand. So with political opportunity theory, it's the idea that change and an opportunity for change has to exist first in order for change to happen. So change can't happen unless the moment is right. Change can't happen unless everything is aligned and other things are already happening. So the correct people are in office. We've elected the right people to make the change. We operate under the system that already exists. We are protesting in that cycle, in that system that already exists, but we're not looking to change the system itself. Now, this has happened when we've seen like the broadening of enfranchisement. We included one group into being able to do something, so we expand on it a little more because we're already throwing in one group that gets to do more stuff. So why not add another group? It is very much we make change when the time is perfect to make change. The next one is resource mobilization theory. And what you're going to see with all three that I'm introducing, you probably can like pinpoint orgs that use all three, and you've probably seen all three in your own work. So resource mobilization theory, the key issue here is you have access to resources. If you do not have access to resources, money, time, people, you cannot make any change. It is not emotionally driven at all. There's no conversations around values. There's no sharing stories. Success is 100% determined. Do you have resources? Yes, then you might be successful. If the answer is no, you will not be successful under this model. You have to have the resources in order to have success. The last one that I'm going to introduce is one that y'all might be somewhat familiar with, Marshall Ganz. This is what a lot of organizations are leaning very much into right now. It's the idea of like the subjective agency of social movements, meaning stories, my story about housing and my housing issues might move you to have a shared experience, like Nancy said, might move you to think, hey, I've never thought about housing being a human right. I've never thought about something like that, because an emotional connection makes you think a little bit more. This is when we're talking about like narratives and intentions and values. Marshall Ganz is the organizing principle, or Gantz's principle for organizing is what we see a lot of right now. And the thing that when I was a baby organizer, and I still feel like a baby organizer most of the time, honestly, because I didn't realize how much organizing I was doing before I actually was okay with calling myself an organizer. Excuse me. I was like, why are there so many theories? This is like such a beautiful, funny moment. In the 60s and 70s, they started studying us. And by us, I mean organizers. By us, I mean people that were bucking the system. And instead of calling us irrational and crazed deviants, we were starting to be seen as political actors. So psychologists and sociologists were like, prior to the 60s and 70s, we're like, ooh, these people are just crazy town. We're just going to go like this with them. After studying, there was reasons found about why we organized. That's not saying organizing didn't happen before the 60s and 70s. That's saying prior to that, people that organize, people that buck to the system were considered problems, were considered deviants. It's all a lot of stuff that when you think about it, everything kind of intersects and connects. We do need political change in order to make change. However, we don't need to wait until that moment because the power of the people can pull out when we're having stories and connecting with one another. And you're damn right we're fighting for resources, because if someone doesn't have a safe place to go at night to sleep, they are not going to show up to some mobilization canvassing events. So it's all intersected in that way. So if people say to you like, oh, I only follow Gantz's model of organizing. I've had people say this to me and I'm like, okay, you're one of those people who like probably think that, oh, only certain people can be organizers. Everyone's an organizer. If you have tried to make some kind of change happen in some place in your life, you've probably done some organizing. So understand that when people talk about these specific theories, a lot of times it's more that intellectualization of the movement, which is like, it's not working, y'all. Like we can't intellectualize what we're doing. We got to connect as humans. We've got to really find those moments that we're in it together. The one thing I can really say is I do really believe in this quote from Marshall Ganz. And if someone could come off mute and read this out loud, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I go. Organizing can be learned as a leadership practice based on accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose under condition of uncertainty.
Thank you, Esther. Yeah, so organizing can be learned first. Yes. Learned as a leadership practice. Yes. We're creating new leaders in organizing. You're accepting the responsibility that it is my job not to be the center of attention, the spotlight. That's a big difference between activists and organizers. Activists, and this is very, I'm getting into like wordsmithing things and being very specific on definitions. I do not like being called an activist because I do not want to be on the mic. I do not want to be the person that has the spotlight. I do not want to be the person that's quoted in things. I want to get more people so it's all of us fighting together. I want to elevate more leaders, because if the work just falls on me or one of you, an individual, we can't really make any change because we're just one person. So this idea of achieving purpose together and accepting that responsibility that, yeah, you know what, it's my job to raise up other people in this work. It's my job for us to stand next to one another and not me in front and people behind me, or me necessarily hiding in the back and being like, oh, well, I'm a white woman that is a middle-class white woman, so I don't have any ability to speak here. I shouldn't be the one to talk. Richard, go ahead.
Kudos to you, because it's all well and good to have the power of the people, but it has to start with one person raising their hand and educating others around them as to this need and motivating others, incentivizing or creating initiatives that will help them to see that they too can contribute to and play a role in the bigger picture, the long-term opportunity.
Mm-hmm. We have so
that
much
will
power.
Benefit them as much as everyone around them.
We all have so much power working together.
Yes.
And thank you for that. Like we all, like the amount of power that people hold is a little scary sometimes, I think, for folks, which is such a great transition because we're about to go into power. Thank you for that lead in. I want to ask a few quiet questions before we dive into that. And I just want folks to like reflect on these to themselves. The first one, why do we organize? And just think about like, why do you care? Why'd you show up today? And then who's your community? Who are the people around you that you care about? Who's people that you interact with consistently? Is it the, is it the barista every day that you know their name and you know what's going on with their family? I have one of those. I actually talk all the time about the climate with her because there's Tesla chargers like right behind the coffee shop I go to. And every time I'm there, I yell, "What do you think of your king now?" Just my little act of defiance. So weird. I'm a weird person in real life, y'all. It's like, I bless my husband for being a museum person that puts up with me sometimes. Yeah. And last one, what is power? To you, what is power? And it's okay if you can't necessarily identify these things immediately. And it's okay if you feel a little strange thinking about power. I want to go through what it is and what are some reactions to it. So first, if I told you there's about 45 minutes left of class and I'm like, hey, you know what? You are in charge now. You get to be the education director for the rest of the week. I'm taking a vacation. I'm done. I need one. Are you panicked? Are you scared? What's going on in your head? What's happening? Say someone says, hey, here's the keys to the city. It's up to you to make all the decisions. And whatever you do stands, whatever you say stands. Like what's happening here in your with your coworkers at work, you're suddenly the boss. What happens? How do you feel? Here are some common reactions to power. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through these, and I'm also going to put each one in the chat. If you're having one of these reactions, the next couple slides, I think everyone has the deck. I want to redrop it in case you don't have the deck anymore. Feel free to fill out your reaction to power while I'm talking about it. It's in slides 19 through 21. Feel free to pick a box, write down your reaction when I walk through these, or just think about it. And when I say your reaction to power, each one of these, think of it on a spectrum. You're not always going to be one or the other. You are going to be somewhere on the spectrum that connects with some of these reactions. Black and white, not a good way to think about organizing. So first and foremost, you've got hide in the weeds. This person hides in the corner the entire time. I am just here to help. I am just here, just listening. I don't want to take charge. I don't want to take leadership. I'm just here to help you. The lone wolf. I'm going to own this right now. I'm a lone wolf a lot of the times. I need to work on it. I'm the person that has all the ideas, not because I think my ideas are the best. I have them, and I think I have to carry them out myself. I had the idea. I have to do it. I don't ask for help. I just do it myself. DIY all the time is exhausting, and I need to stop it. Self-proclaimed dummy. I've taken this too. The person who always assumes I didn't know enough. I'm new. This is my first day. I don't know enough to speak up. I don't have enough yet. I'll just sit here and watch. And when I'm here a little bit, I'll speak up a little more. The victim, self-righteous. Nobody's listening to me. Well, if you would have listened to me, well, nobody is hearing what I have to say. Always. And finally, the chaos creator. Someone who's overly aggressive, loud, ineffective, yelling, bullying, taking over, creating chaos. This person a lot of time is the devil's advocate. They are the person that's like, I just want to introduce this one situation that, maybe will never happen, but we have to deal with it before we move forward. And a lot of times my automatic response now, living in the South, living in the Bible Belt, I'm like, the devil doesn't need an advocate. It's the devil. So when you think about these, think about where your reactions to power are. Think about what happens when you are given power. Feel free to drop it in the chat, kind of dig into it. Power is action, right? It comes from a Latin and a Spanish root, actually, poder. And so thinking about what power is, I would love for folks, if you're in a place where you can Google the definition of power. And what's probably coming up for you, if you Google the definition of power, you'll see the first piece of it. And it says the ability to do something or act. The ability to do something or act. And that is incredibly, now, I was going to say incredibly powerful. Power is the ability to do something. It's the ability to act. It's the ability. It's an active thing. It's not, oh, I've got all this power and these things. It's I have the ability to do something. And you'll hear me say a lot in this next section that we're going to go through. Power is organized people and organized money. And the thing is, on the left, we're working on organizing people. We don't have organized money. The right, however, has organized money and has organized people. As much as I think leftists and folks on the left side of things like to say, oh, the right is X, Y, Z. Oh, they're wackadoo, or oh, they're not, we don't need to listen to them. They are in formation though. So they are not just like, oh, these wackadoos over here. They are very much in formation. They're moving together. They're organized. They're organized and hating the left. So everyone's a socialist. Everyone's a communist. Richard, go ahead.
Okay, you were saying power to look up. I chose instead to look up the word action. And it stems from the old Middle English word, which is actually related to the old French action, which is related to, in turn, the Latin actio, or the act of doing or making, from actus. So in a similar way, both words are tied to getting things done.
Yes. Thank you. I was like, when you said action, I was like, here we go. Amazing. Before we move on to how we got here, how are we feeling? Abby, I saw when I get in a position of power, I try to identify the skills in my group and set them free to complete a task. So it's that organization, project manager feel. I feel that. When you think about how we got here, Esther, I see you came off mute. Go ahead.
Something I was missing in the definition of power. What about those who feel like they don't, I'm the one who can make it, but not necessarily the lone wolfer, but doesn't create chaos. So they feel, yeah, I should be me. I'm in power, I can do this.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I'm understanding you. Someone who says like, I could do this, I should be in power, but isn't in power.
Yeah.
I think that falls in, honestly, I think that falls in a little bit to like the victim, like, oh, well, if people would only listen to me, if people would only, and they're not actually, if they're not active. If they're active, I think they fall a little bit, like you think about it, when you're actually looking at power in a healthy way, in a hey, collective way, you're not necessarily going to fall into one of these, right? So if people are elected officials and are running for office and say they really do believe in co-governance, leading with the people, say they really want to be part of something else, they might not fall in these. That doesn't mean they don't have these tendencies when just, how we all like have that kind of default that we go into sometimes.
Yeah.
When we're not thinking. I think reactions to power are more of a default you go into when power is thrust upon you like this poor cat, as opposed to when I'm really thinking about it going, hey, you know what? I'm not doing this, but I'm giving an example. I'm going to run for office and I want to have a collective and work with my constituents and work with my community, because I think that's a very different approach to power. I don't know if that answers your question or yeah. So like thinking about like, well, I should be in power, but I'm not. I think that's a little bit of victim.
Okay.
Richard, go ahead, and then we're going to move on to
Yes, of
how we
course.
got
Now,
here.
tied to your book, to the conversation that you just had with Esther, you were speaking of working, with others in a leadership position. I think of the word collaboration, and leadership in any kind of position other than a dictatorship, to be successful involves drawing of others in to get their respective opinions to, in effect, draw out a, a collection of things, and then working together on those to determine which would be most beneficial to the ultimate objectives of the group as a whole, and to serving those, whose needs you are seeking to assist.
Mhm. I better see you in the 5th session of this, the co-governance one, because it's all about that. It's all about the idea of working together with electeds to get things done and power meetings and things like that. So
Yeah, but
I
you
hope,
put it in contrast to the word dominance.
yes. Y'all, this is like, I'm like, I'm going to go off topic too much, but I'm going to keep going. How do we get here? We got to a place that we need to get power. We need on our side, we need to change things, right? Because life is not like sunshine and roses. People are struggling. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The working class is becoming even more working class. The ideas of being able to afford things is insanity right now. And it's all by design. And so I want to go through and not just be my like, it's all by design conspiracy theory. I want to walk you through how we got here. So the rise of the 1% is truly a thing that happened. If you're not familiar with Lewis Powell and the Powell memo, I highly recommend look it up. I will send you text of it afterwards. So what essentially happened is you've got Lewis Powell, and he was a Supreme Court justice. Now, before he was a Supreme Court justice, he wrote a letter to his buddy who worked at the Chamber of Commerce saying, and it was entitled specifically, Attack on American Free Enterprise System. This memo outlined the ways in which businesses should defend and counter the disquieting voices, the people who were saying, this isn't enough. We're struggling. We can't do this anymore. Those crazed deviants, those folks, us. The American dream, the act of being able to do all of those things that are associated with America still, it frightened a lot of people that had power. Something that's fascinating about power, and we see it in all sorts of structures. We saw it in the 2020 election. We saw it in the insurrection. When people have power, when people want power and are like, this is mine, they cling to it. And they don't want to offer it to other people. They don't want the changing of the guard. They don't want something different to happen. So Powell actually outlined 3 specific things that he thought the Chamber of Commerce should start doing in order to fight these voices. So first was corporate power, the idea that corporations should hold more power. If you give the corporations more power, then they can shut down these smaller people. They can squash these smaller people. A tax on the public sector, things get privatized. But specifically in this moment, in the Powell memo, it was the idea that the public sector is doing too much, too many public programs, too many things offering opportunities and chances. And then finally, you've got crackdowns. So really like bringing the hammer down, really this idea of being really conservative and fighting for these things, as opposed to going, oh, you know what, like this kind of fits. It's like, no, this is black and white. Something bad is happening. So we're going to crack down on it. We're going to push harder. Before we go to the next slide, I want to set it up and say really specifically that I'm going to show you a graph. It stops at 2014. And I want to ask you what you notice with this graph. Here's the graph. Take a minute, take it in. What do you notice?
Well, I noticed that the rich just keep getting richer. I mean, I know that's the title name, but the people at the bottom, I know for a fact, struggle.
Yep. And yeah, go ahead. Come on.
I noticed the first part, it was even. The top 1% earner until 80, it was even, and after 80, it shoot up.
Yes. What happened in the 80s? What happened in 80?
Mhm.
Ronald
Maybe
Reagan,
Lewis.
the person you love so much.
Maybe Lewis Paul.
Right? Like I laugh because I'm like, thank you, Ronald Reagan. I really appreciate it. Both of you, right? Like we know this. We know the rich get richer. We know the poor stay where they're at. To see it in a graph like this, to see, like Esther was saying, it's got this like boop-a-doo, okay, it's just going around, and then it shoots up. And then to see down here, bottom 50% of earners, 1980, 16,000, 2014, 16,200.
Oh gosh.
How does this make you feel?
Frustrated and disgust.
Don't worry, I will not leave you frustrated, angry, and disgusted. I never do that. I'm like trying to light you up a little bit. So let's think about what happened in the 80s. Let's think about specifically, not historically, what happened in the 80s, because I like thinking about what's happening in society. You're welcome to dive into the history. The rise of the 1%, it was a very specific strategy they used starting in the 80s. So first, it was building out corporate infrastructure. It was huge. You've got business groups like the Chamber of Commerce. You've got money like the Koch brothers. You've got think tanks like the Cato Institute. You've got media like Fox News, and you've got membership orgs like the NRA. Think about what is on the left in any of these categories. Business group. Money, who's a big donor, like you know this name. Think tanks. Media. Membership orgs like the NRA. We don't have that infrastructure. Then you've got this wonderful quote from Milton Friedman. He's an American economist, lover of capitalism. And I want you to think about this quote while I'm reading it out loud and what happened just recently with COVID. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. I believe our basic function is to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. We've had a lot of change since COVID, and I don't think a lot of it's been great. Things are getting harder, and this isn't new. Everything that's happened before will happen again. History repeats itself. This is how it works. But a crisis is a moment of change. A crisis is where we can see, for example, you've got the COVID crisis. You've got people still hurting from the COVID crisis. Instead of offering more resources, let's add policing. Let's add more police. The communities that have the least amount of crime are the communities that have the most amount of resources. But you think about how things are set up. This crisis, this moment of crisis, it's allowing for change. And then the final piece of their strategy, and this is very much by design and very well thought out over 40 years, you've got structural reforms, right? So you've got the privatization of things. Specifically, you start with smaller services like parking lots, and then you move into things like electricity. And it just becomes this like, oh, well, we have to privatize things. We can't have public sector programs anymore. Think about the Powell memo. Gotta cut those out a little bit, giving people a little too much of a head. We have to keep people where they are. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with this aftermath of ideas, the things that we've heard over the years. One, rugged individualism. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is physically impossible. sit down, put on a pair of boots, try to pull yourself up by it. You can't. Free market for the win. More capitalism equals more capitalism, more opportunities. It helps, right? We don't have to, you know, make sure people can afford a place to live or healthcare. It's a commodity. The government's wasteful. The government can't provide this stuff. The government doesn't know how to spend money. That one's a little true. Unions are bad. We shouldn't do unions. Unions should not happen. These are the things we're told. Like union busters are very real. If anyone's looking for a union book, by the way, y'all, Devin specifically, you cued me in. This book is amazing. On the Line, specifically story of class solidarity and two women's epic fight to build a union. We just read this in our workbook club because we're a bunch of cuties that really like each other. So we just read it, and it's like a really nice narrative about unions, as well as like it goes through history and unions through history, like the Triangle Fire and things like that. And then the last one, sorry, I digress. You've got race as a lever. So using race as this like fighting point. And we've heard it, right? We've seen people say things like, oh, just as an example, the stereotype of a quote unquote welfare queen. When in actuality, that stereotype, the stereotype that exists of that Black woman that is the welfare queen, there was, even if you watched Glow, they had a character, a wrestler that was using that welfare queen stereotype. When in actuality, just as many white people were on welfare, if not more. Here's my trigger warning. I'm about to play something that Lee Atwater, a strategist, said about race. It really kind of puts a point on some of it. I want to say that the content warning here is that he does use the N word, and not as I just used it. He says it. So I want to offer an opportunity. If you would like to step away from your computer right now, if you would like to unplug, if you'd like to turn the sound off completely. Again, when it is done, I'm going to like wave my hands and look silly on the screen to show you that it is done and the quote is over. I know there's a lot of trauma around that word, so I don't want to be like, hey, I'm just going to throw this on you. So I'm giving you a moment. If you're going to step away, step away. I'm going to count to 5, and then I'm going to progress onto the slide, and then I'm going to play it. You still have time if it starts playing, because there's a little bit of content beforehand, to step away. So I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Going to the slide. I'm going to go ahead and play it now. Can folks hear like a buzzing noise a little bit? Now it's silent. It's still silent, so don't worry if you can't hear anything.
Here's how I would approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all aren't quoting me on this. All right, I won't hear. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts you, it backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
The sound is done. I'm going to give folks a minute. think about how hearing that, I bet many of you know it. Think about how many of you feel after hearing that. I'll also send it, but that's where it came from. So coming from this, and this is 1981. Now you're probably thinking, what's going on with the Dems right now? Hit a lot of the right? I haven't really talked about the left. You've got a group of establishment Dems at this time. And even to now, you've got Democrats that are Democrat in name, and they want things to continue the way they are. And I want to just let people know, you might be offended by the person that's on my next slide, and that's okay, because you've got some Democrats out there that will sell out the working class and sell out unions. They will buy into individualism and meritocracy, that we have deserving poor. We have people that deserve to get things, and then people that like, oh, they just need to X, Y, and Z in order to deserve it. Instead of housing is a human right, it's, oh, this person worked really hard. They deserve something because they worked really hard. No, you're a human and you live, you deserve housing. And then they're not speaking to real lived experiences. Listening to politicians talk sometimes, just going like, do you know a person? Have you talked to a person in the last couple weeks other than people around you? This is a lot. So I want to just check in with people. How are people? We're on the home stretch, and I will not leave you in whatever angry, frustrated, whatever feeling you're having right now. I will not leave you here, I promise. How are you feeling now? Check in with your body. Feel free to drop on chat, come off mute, anything like that.
For my part, this offers an outlet to some degree for the lack of diversity I experience here in Vermont. By its own, how do I say, population statistics, it tends to be, and please, no offense to anyone intended here, overly white and, very, middle class. I've grown up in an environment that was, mixed, upper middle class and, lower middle class, and across the board. I've gone to top-notch schools. I've traveled the world. I don't object to either one. In fact, I'm trying now, because I'm on the other side, the lower side, to assist those around me.
And that's the thing though, like when you open by saying, oh, please no one be offended, we shouldn't be offended when someone says that like an area is predominantly white. We should acknowledge it, because I think people that get offended when whiteness is called out, like, I mean, I'm not going to get into like white supremacy, and because all of it ties together. I will send some resources where you can start digging into things like that if anyone is interested. Like the pyramid of white supremacy is a really good one to like think about covert and overt acts of racism that occur consistently in our lives. The thing that I want to flag that I'll also send stuff on today that I didn't send last time is the race class narrative. And the race class narrative, I think it's not for everybody. I appreciate it quite a bit, because I look at the race class narrative in a way that like we've been forced to be divided. We've been forced to go like, I don't know what you deal with because, and this is not what you're saying, Richard, this is me just explaining what the race class narrative is. Like this 1%, we've been forced to say, oh, I'm not getting this because all of the Black people are getting this. I'm not getting this because the immigrants are getting this. I can't get a good job because this person that came over from Mexico with all the drugs on their back, like we're forced to believe with Fox News and things like that. Like that's why. And it's like, that is not the case. Like no matter what color we are, and this is not saying we don't see color. This is saying no matter what color we are, Black, brown, white, anything, we all deserve things. We deserve housing. We deserve healthcare. We deserve safe and dignified places to live. And we should be going like this to the people that are keeping us here and trying to get us to infight. Instead of infighting, we should be going, hey, what are you, that line going back here? Why are you having this big jump and I'm still down here? Go ahead, Richard.
I value hearing from other perspectives, to being able to interact with people with other different perspectives than mine own. I grew up with people who were Black, Asian, from Latin America. I speak Spanish fluently, and I do so because having that language fluency breaks down, eliminates a barrier that otherwise is unnecessary, frankly. And I feel that there's not enough recognition that language is simply like another wall that need not exist.
Absolutely. We'll have to talk at some point offline, because I'm going to Guatemala this summer at a Spanish language school to like finish learning, continue learning always, but to get over myself that I'm going to sound like a white woman trying to speak Spanish and try to get it more in my mouth.
No es ningún problema. Necesita practicar las trabalenguas.
See, I knew exactly what you were saying, but I'm scared to talk. So I'm going to go into the 3 paths. Esther, you went off mute. Go ahead.
Please close out.
I'm
Esther,
good. I just want to give a shout out.
Oh, okay. So we have, so real talk, like we've got 13 minutes left. We're going to end a little early, but I want to say where we're going. Because you know me, I'm never going to let you, well, if you don't know me, I'm never going to let you feel mad and not know what to do with it. We have 3 paths forward. First path, we can fight for what we have. The little we have, we can cling to it. We can say, I am going to fight. I am not going to like let go of what I have. They can't take more from me. This is mine. Here we go. Second one, we can work to get back to the old economy. We can say, you know what? We needed what we had before the 80s. We need to go back to what we had before like back there. That's what we're going to do. I don't think that's good enough. And as you notice, there's only 2 paths on my slide, because there's the third. We can and we should reimagine what's possible. We need to not just settle for status quo. It's not okay what's happening in this country right now. And I'm going to be very specific to this country. It's happening all around the world, and I'm going to be very specific to here. We can reimagine it. And this is where organizing comes in, right? And it's not just like, go out and organize. Before you do that, we all need to understand our personal self-interest in this. And like Richard was saying, have conversations with other people in order to understand their self-interest. So first, let's figure out what self-interest is. Now we're going to just like dip our toes in it. Not the next one, sorry, power mapping is next. The third one is all about stories of self, and that's where self-interest comes in, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So selfishness, being selfish, is caring more about yourself than other people. I might like to say that a lot of politicians, even though they call themselves public servants, they care about themselves. They care about getting reelected. They care about holding the power. Mitch McConnell, I'm looking at you. Have you even met with a constituent lately? You are not a public service. You are just squatting in your seat. That's selfishness. Selflessness is what corporations and the 1% try to tell us is the language of power. Oh, you shouldn't care so much about stuff like these. You have happiness. You don't need money or eggs or things that you purchase. You have your health, which is good. You know, like having health is great and important, but like selflessness is valuing others over yourself. That's not okay. Like you can't do that. You're going to burn out. You're going to crash and burn. It's not all right. Self-interest respects both sides of the relationship. You understand why you're doing the thing, because you've struggled with finding housing and seeing people struggle finding housing, so you don't want anyone else to struggle finding housing. And I understand the people I'm working with, the people I'm organizing with, because if I just understand my self-interest, I don't want people to struggle with housing. Housing should be a human right. I could be very manipulative. I could tell my story. I could move people to action based on emotions, and that's manipulation. But if I'm talking to tenants, there's one property that we're actually working on here in Winston-Salem right now, where the city just found out it owned this property after owning it for 30 years, hasn't done anything to this, and tried to evict all the residents because they realized that they screwed up. So they tried to evict elderly and disabled people in the guise of, oh, we're protecting them because it's very dangerous for them to be here. Now, I could get mad and be like, with my little group, and be like, this shouldn't happen. What we did do, we talked to each of the tenants and we asked them what they wanted. And we're fighting with them to get what they want. Not what we want, what they want. Because we understand why this matters to them. And that's self-interest. When both parties are clear on why they want to do something, then you can achieve something meaningful for both. Then you have buy-in. Then it's not charity. It's not like, oh, I have some time, so I'm going to go, again, nothing wrong, I'm going to go work at the soup kitchen. It's, hey, I understand why you want to change and you understand why I want to change. So let's work together and let's fight this together and make this change. So because I love homework, and you're welcome, this is a good opportunity. If you're like, I would love to meet with Nina, or I would love to meet with Jen, I would love to meet with Frida. This is a great opportunity to take advantage of our times because we want to do this. How do you feel about self-interest versus selfishness versus selflessness? This is something to do after that we'll send you in a prompt in the email too. And the bigger question, what is your self-interest in the organizing that you're doing? Why are you doing what you're doing? And when you understand why you are doing what you're doing a little bit more, talk to some other people and see why they do what they do, or talk to them about what you do and why you do it. Because the best way to get someone else sometimes to think about their own self-interest is to tell them yours. I can tell you that I, over the past, can't even tell you how many years, have been like slowly working on organizing my dad. My dad being really proud to vote for Trump in 2016, grew up in a conservative Christian household, like fun times, even though he was who he was, he's very different now. And we've gone through a lot of forgiveness with one another. And now he's asking me questions when we're hanging out or we're on the phone. And he's like, why are there so many police here? They're not doing anything. Why are there so many homeless people in the airport? Why isn't someone helping them? And I'm like, well, it's policy choice, Dad. And then we get into it a little more. He no longer looks at people and says, oh, your situation is the actions, the consequences of your actions. He looks at people and he's like, I don't understand why rich people are getting richer and people like this are struggling. So further understanding that self-interest in yourself, because I used to be the leftist that was like, if you are not woke, you are not woke, so you are not welcome. Now I am the leftist that is like, I take this from my friend Adam Krugel from People's Action. We need to leave room for the still waking. And I think that's what organizing is. It is leaving space for people that are still waking up to this, having those conversations when you can, and moving forward. So we're at the end. I want to first thank y'all for spending some time with us. I hope I see you at other organizing 101s. We really wanted to break this down for people. First and foremost, feel free to drop in the chat how you are leaving this session today on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, oh my goodness, I'm even more confused about organizing than when I walked in. And 10 being like, whoa, let's organize. I'm ready. Let's go. How you feeling? What are you leaving? I love it. Oh my gosh, this is cool. I love the 10s, 10 plus. Y'all, we are really excited about programming at Renew this year in specific. So I want to say, when I do send you your follow-up, if there is anything you ever wish you could see, anything that you haven't seen in the organizing world, that you're like, you know what, I want to take a class on this, please fill out that feedback form and put it in there, because I am like really digging into skills that people can use immediately and run with. And that's how I'm running the education department this year. And I'm pumped. I started at Renew as a contract worker, writing curriculum. I worked as a lead trainer and then a manager. And then now I'm the education director. And I'm like, let's do this. Renew, I realize I forgot to tell y'all what Renew does. So I'll do this very quickly. Renew US, like you heard from Frida, we work in different states. And I will say the biggest thing that I can tell you about Renew is we are organizing with groups that are on the ground already organizing. So we are not picking a state going like, Florida needs help. We're like, what groups, what grassroots groups are already doing stuff on the ground that needs support? And that's how we're connecting with them, is like, okay, we're offering education programs, we're offering connections, we're offering candidate support, candidate recruitment, things like that. We don't work on what's called an independent expenditure races. What that means is like random person number 5 is running for office and asks us to endorse them. We don't do that. We have to endorse people that our partners endorse. So that is truly, I dropped our like base website. Updates will be coming soon. All of that being said, thank you all for spending the afternoon with me, and take good care of yourself. Bye, y'all.